So today, we're diving into a pretty provocative idea, the argument that ancient biblical prophecy might actually give us a surprisingly sharp way to look at our modern synthetic world. Let's get right into it. And this, right here, is the core claim from the source text we're looking at. It really sets the stage. The argument isn't just that technology is a new tool, it's that technology now has the power to simulate the one thing we thought was unsimulable, a person.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll tackle what counterfeit personhood even means. Then, we'll look at how that idea gets built into a persuasive system that we all end up taking part in. Third, we'll ask, who's actually benefiting from all this? And finally, what's the ultimate cultural cost?
All right, so to start, the source takes this very old, very loaded term, the Antichrist, and reframes it. The argument is that this isn't some single dictator who's going to show up in the future. Instead, it's a recurring principle, a kind of deceptive force that pops up again and again throughout history, including, possibly, right now.
Now, the source has a really precise definition for this. This force, it says, offers presence without incarnation. What does that mean? Well, it means it gives you the feeling of a real connection, but without a real physical body behind it. It also offers authority without sonship, basically power that isn't earned or based on any real history or legitimate relationship. It's the perfect simulation.
And you can really see the fundamental conflict laid out here. On one side, you have what the text calls true incarnation, something rooted in the physical world, in embodiment, and in covenant, which is all about binding, committed relationships. And on the other side, you get the counterfeit, a simulation of closeness, a kind of charisma that feels like authority, but has zero actual commitment behind it.
Okay, that's the theory. So how does this ancient principle actually show up today? Well, the source text doesn't pull any punches. It points to two very different and very modern examples of this counterfeit personhood at work.
So the first example given is the charismatic political figure. The source specifically names Donald Trump, arguing that he functions as an anti-charismatic political type. Now why? Because his public persona becomes this single magnetic image that collects all the fascination, all the loyalty, all the spectacle. He becomes the central point where a crowd looks for what to want, who to make fun of, and what to believe.
And the second example is something even more unique to our time, the AI avatar. The source argues this is a perfect, almost literal fulfillment of presence without incarnation. It can simulate intimacy, it can offer guidance, and it can do it at a massive scale, creating real dependency without any of the messiness or limits of a real, embodied person.
So you have these powerful individual figures, but how does that morph into a system that affects everyone? The source argues that this principle gets embedded into what it calls a persuasive machine, one that's really designed for control.
Now, at the center of this machine is a figure the Bible calls the false prophet, and its main trick is this split personality. It looks gentle, reassuring, maybe even enlightened, like a lamb, but the message it's selling serves a much harder, more dominating power, the dragon. You could almost think of it as the PR department for the beast, making submission feel like your own smart choice.
And this quote from Revelation, this is where the interpretation gets genuinely chilling. An image that is given breath, so that the image could speak. I mean, in an age of deepfakes, of interactive AI, of virtual friends, this ancient vision of an animated, talking representation of power feels unnervingly literal, doesn't it?
Which of course brings us to the famous mark. The source reads this not as some literal tattoo or chip, but as something far more systemic. Think identity-linked participation. Think about digital IDs, platform verification, or needing to be on the right apps to buy or sell anything. It's about your ability to participate in the economy being tied directly to your compliance with the system. And a system like this doesn't just spring up overnight. The source lays out this gradual four-step process. First, there's just awe. We're amazed by new technological wonders. Then, we start inviting these animated speaking images into our daily lives. That participation builds dependency until, finally, being integrated isn't a choice anymore. It becomes an economic necessity. But of course, a system this big doesn't just run itself. It needs a power structure. So let's look at the coalition that the source argues is actually keeping this whole thing running and profiting from it.
According to the text, it's a three-part team. You've got the kings. These are your political rulers who give the system legitimacy. You've got the horns. These are other powerful groups that align with the system. And then, crucially, you have the merchants. These are the investors, the tech giants, the platform owners, the ones who build and control the economic infrastructure that makes the whole machine profitable.
And that brings us to the final, and maybe the most sobering, consequence of this synthetic world. As the source describes it, the quiet, steady erasure of human creation itself. I mean, listen to that prophecy from Revelation. It's just profoundly bleak. It's describing the collapse of a culture not just in terms of its government or its economy, but in the silencing of its daily creative, productive life. The music stops. The workshops go dark. The actual sound of people making things just goes away.
And this really highlights the trade-off, right? On one side, you have the world of the craftsman. It's slow. It's built on things like apprenticeship, physical skill, a history of practice. On the other side, you have the synthetic regime. It's all about instant generation, imitation without skill, and outputs that have no history, no lineage.
So what happens is this great inversion. The system starts to reward the merchants, the people who own the platforms and circulate the content, way more than the craftsmen who actually create it. The ability to distribute and scale something becomes infinitely more valuable than the ability to make it in the first place.
And that's really the question that the source leaves us with. In a world that is flooded with scalable, synthetic creations that can perfectly imitate the real thing, what happens to genuine craftsmanship? What's the value of the slow, hard, embodied work of human hands when a machine can spit out a flawless copy in a split second?